Learn on the road with Mike and Jennifer.
Good evening, everyone. You're very welcome to the Learn on the Road podcast with Mike and Jennifer. Today, we're going on a deep dive into the glycemic index.
That's right. We often call it GI for short.
You got it. And we'll see if a low GI diet is really all it's cracked up to be.
We'll look into the science and see if it checks out.
Like, could it help with weight loss, or is it good for managing diabetes? What do you think?
Well, think of the GI as a ranking system for foods.
Okay, a ranking system. I like that.
Yeah, it's on a scale of 0 to 100. Foods at the low end, they have a minimal effect on your blood sugar.
Gotcha.
But the ones at the high end, those cause a more dramatic spike.
So it all comes down to how quickly the carbs in the food turn into glucose and get into your bloodstream. You got it. Okay, I'm starting to get the picture. So give me an example. Like, what happens if I eat something high on the GI scale?
Okay, picture this. You eat a piece of white bread.
White bread, okay.
Yeah, that's high on the GI scale, and it gets digested really quickly. And then that leads to a rapid rise in your blood sugar.
Makes sense. So what would be a better choice? Something low GI.
Right. If you opt for some lentils, those are low GI. The digestion process is slower.
Much slower.
Yeah, so you end up with a more gradual rise in blood sugar.
I see. So it's about controlling those blood sugar spikes.
Exactly. And you know what's really interesting? Studies have actually shown that low GI diets, they can be just as effective for weight loss as just cutting calories.
Really?
But without that feeling of deprivation, you know?
Oh, that's interesting. No wonder so many people are interested in this.
Yeah.
But I guess a big question is, why would someone choose to follow a low GI diet in the first place?
Well, for people with diabetes, it can really help in managing their blood sugar levels.
Right.
But it's also become popular for those who want to manage their weight.
Okay.
And potentially reduce the risk of some health conditions.
Like what kinds of conditions?
Like, heart disease or stroke.
So it's about making choices that help keep your blood sugar stable. And that can have a positive impact on your overall health.
Exactly. You're getting it.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see the bigger picture. But to really understand this, we need to dig into how carbs actually work in the body.
Absolutely. We need to go back to the basics.
Okay, let's do it. What are the different types of carbs?
You've got your sugars, then you've got your starches, and then your fiber.
Right, and sugars and starches, those are like quick energy bursts for the body.
That's right. Your body breaks them down into glucose.
And the glucose, that's what our cells use for fuel, right?
That's exactly it.
Okay, and what about fiber? What does that do?
Well, that one pretty much just cruises through.
It doesn't get digested the same way.
No, not at all.
Interesting. So it's like sugars and starches provide quick energy, and fiber kind of just keeps things moving, I guess.
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay, so we've got these different types of carbs that get broken down into glucose.
Right.
But there's got to be something controlling all this, right? Like, how does our body know what to do with all that glucose?
Right. This is where your pancreas comes in.
Oh, the pancreas. I always forget about the pancreas.
It plays a crucial role. It releases these hormones, insulin and glucagon.
Okay, insulin and glucagon. I've heard of those. What do they do?
Well, they act like traffic cops for glucose.
Traffic cop. I
Yep.
like that analogy.
Yeah. So insulin, it helps move glucose from your blood into your cells.
So it's like directing the glucose where it needs to go to be used for energy.
Exactly. And then glucagon, it releases stored glucose from your liver
When does it do that?
when your blood sugar levels dip too low.
So it's like a backup system, making sure you always have enough energy available.
Right. It's all about balance.
So what we eat affects our blood sugar, but how our body processes it matters too, right?
Right.
And these hormones are working behind the scenes to keep everything in check.
Exactly. It's a pretty amazing system.
It really is. But I'm still curious about the GI. How does it fit into all of this?
Well, the speed at which that glucose enters your bloodstream is influenced by the food itself, which is where the GI comes in.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection. So let's talk GI numbers. You mentioned a scale of 0 to 100.
Yeah.
How do those numbers break down into categories? Like what's considered low, medium, and high?
All right, so foods with a GI of 55 or lower, those are considered low GI.
Okay, 55 or lower is low.
Right. Then those between 56 and 69, they're medium GI.
Got it.
And anything 70 or above, that's high GI.
So 70 plus is high. But how do they figure out those numbers in the first place? Like who decides what goes where?
Well, researchers do a lot of testing. They compare a food's effect on blood sugar to the effect of pure sugar.
Okay, so if a food has a high GI score, does that mean it will cause a bigger spike in blood sugar than pure sugar?
That's right. It means it's digested really quickly and causes a more rapid rise in blood sugar.
Interesting. So here's something that just popped into my head. Cantaloupe, for example.
Yeah.
We usually think of that as a healthy choice, right?
Yeah. definitely. But you know what? Cantaloupe actually has a medium to high GI score.
Really? Cantaloupe? I would have guessed it was low GI.
It's surprising, right? It's a good example of why it's important to remember that GI is just one piece of the puzzle.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean. So even if a food has a higher GI, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad choice overall.
Exactly. Cantaloupe might have a higher GI, but it's packed with vitamins and nutrients. So it's not about avoiding it altogether. It's about understanding the bigger picture.
Right. It's about balance. But portion size probably matters too, right? Like even if something has a high GI, a small amount might not have that big of an impact.
That's a great point, and that's where glycemic load comes in, or GL for short. GL takes portion size into account.
Ah, so it gives you a more realistic picture of a food's impact on your blood sugar.
Exactly. It's a really helpful measure.
So just to clarify, even if a food has a high GI, a small portion might have a low GL.
You got it.
Okay, I'm starting to see how it all fits together. So we've got the GI, which gives us a general idea of a food's impact on blood sugar.
Right.
But we also need to think about GL, portion size,
Right.
and the overall nutritional value of the food.
You got it. It's all connected. Welcome back to our deep dive into the glycemic index. You know, it's pretty amazing how much we've learned about the connection between food and our bodies.
It has been really interesting. So we've covered the basics of the GI and how it works. But now I'm thinking, how can we actually use this information, like in everyday life?
Yeah, how can we put it into practice?
Exactly. How can someone incorporate those low GI choices into their meals without, constantly checking charts and tables?
That's the thing. You don't want it to be a chore, right?
Right, exactly. It should be enjoyable.
The GI is a tool to help you make choices, not like a strict rule book. It's more about understanding the general principles and applying them in a way that works for you.
So it's more about awareness than like obsessing over every single number.
You got it. It's about making mindful choices without feeling restricted.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
So where should people start? What are some easy ways to make those mindful choices?
Well, think about those low GI foods we talked about. Leafy greens, colorful fruits, beans, lentils. Those are like the foundation of a blood sugar-friendly diet.
Okay, so those are the foods that release glucose into the bloodstream more slowly.
Right, helping to keep your energy levels more stable.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about some of those higher GI foods that people might still enjoy? Like, I'm thinking white bread, potatoes, things like that. Are those completely off limits?
Not necessarily. It's all about balance and portion control.
So you could still have white bread, for example.
Sure. But think about pairing it with something that will slow down digestion.
Like what?
Well, if you're having a sandwich on white bread, add some protein, like lean turkey or chicken.
Okay, so that helps to balance it out.
Exactly. And add some healthy fats, like avocado. That helps too.
So it's about creating a balanced meal where those higher GI foods are balanced out by others that help slow down the release of glucose.
Precisely. You're getting it.
Okay, I'm feeling more confident about this already. But there's one thing that's still kind of confusing me.
What's that?
Remember how we talked about how the way food is prepared can affect its GI value?
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
Yeah, that was pretty surprising.
It is, isn't it? Think about an apple, for example.
Okay, an apple.
A whole apple has a lower GI than applesauce.
Wait, really? But it's the same fruit.
I know, right? But processing, like turning the apple into applesauce, it breaks down the fiber, and that changes the structure of the carbohydrates, which can lead to a higher GI.
Wow, that's really interesting. So even within the same food group, there can be variations in GI values depending on how it's prepared.
Exactly.
I'm starting to see food in a whole new light now.
I know, it's pretty fascinating stuff, and it really highlights why it's so important to choose whole, unprocessed foods whenever possible. They're not only packed with nutrients, but they also tend to have a lower GI.
Okay, that makes sense. But we focused a lot on the benefits of a low GI diet. Are there any downsides or things we need to be careful about?
That's a great point. It's important to be aware of the limitations. One thing is, the GI doesn't tell you everything about a food's nutritional value. It's just one piece of the puzzle.
Right, because a food could have a low GI, but still be high in fat or sugar.
Exactly. Like whole milk, for example.
Oh yeah, whole milk. It has a low GI, but it's also high in fat and calories.
Right. So you have to consider the overall nutritional profile, not just the GI.
Okay, that's really important to remember. What else? Are there any other limitations of the GI?
Well, another thing to consider is that the GI database isn't complete. There are lots of foods that haven't been tested yet.
So just because a food doesn't have a GI score doesn't mean it's unhealthy.
Exactly. It just means we need more research. And even for foods that do have a GI value, there can be variations.
Kind of variations.
Oh, things like how ripe the food is, how it's cooked, even individual differences in how people digest food.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all system.
Right. It's more like a general guide that can help you make better choices, but you have to be mindful of its limitations.
Okay, I'm glad we cleared that up. So let's say someone is thinking about trying a low GI diet. What advice would you give them?
I'd say focus on the bigger picture. Choose whole, unprocessed foods as much as possible. Prioritize fruits, vegetables, and legumes. And pay attention to portion sizes. It's not about following a bunch of rules. It's about making sustainable changes that support your overall health.
That sounds like great advice. And it never hurts to talk to a professional, right?
Right. It's always a good idea to consult with a registered dietitian or healthcare professional. They can help you figure out a plan that works best for you.
This deep dive has been so insightful. We've really gone beyond just the basics of the GI and explored how to actually use this information.
I agree. We've talked about the nuances, the limitations, and I think we've emphasized the importance of balance.
But we're not done yet. In the next part, we'll dig into research findings on low GI diets and their potential impact on various health conditions. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We're wrapping up our deep dive on the glycemic index.
Yeah, it's time to bring it all together.
I feel like we've built this awesome toolkit.
Right, for understanding how food affects our bodies.
But now I really want to know, does it actually make a difference for our health? Like, what does the research say?
Good question. Let's start with weight management. That's a big one, right?
Yeah, it seems like everyone's always talking about losing weight.
Well, there's some really interesting research on low GI diets and weight loss.
Okay, tell me more.
Studies have shown that low GI diets can be more effective for weight loss compared to high GI diets.
Really? So choosing low GI foods can actually help you lose weight?
It can, especially in the short term.
Huh. And what about those cravings people get when they're trying to lose weight?
Well, remember we talked about how low GI foods help keep your blood sugar stable?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, when your blood sugar is stable, you're less likely to experience those energy crashes that can lead to cravings and overeating.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah.
So you're not getting those sudden drops in energy that make you want to reach for a sugary snack.
Exactly. And some studies suggest that low GI diets might even help regulate your appetite hormones.
What does that mean?
Well, it means you might naturally eat fewer calories over time.
Wow, so it's not just about the immediate impact on blood sugar, but also how those food choices affect your hunger in the long run.
Right. It's like a ripple effect.
This is fascinating.
Okay.
But what about other benefits besides weight loss? We know the GI is really important for people with diabetes, right?
Absolutely. Choosing low GI foods is essential for managing blood sugar levels, especially for people with diabetes.
So it helps prevent those big spikes and dips in blood sugar.
Exactly. It can make a huge difference in how people feel and manage their condition.
Right. But it's not a replacement for other diabetes treatments,
Right.
like medication.
No, definitely not. It's more like another tool in the toolbox. It's about working with your doctor to create a comprehensive plan.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So low GI diets can help people manage diabetes, but what about preventing it in the first place?
That's a great question, and there's some research that suggests it might play a role.
Really? How so?
Well, remember how we talked about the pancreas working hard to regulate blood sugar?
Yeah.
If you're constantly eating high GI foods, it puts a lot of strain on your pancreas.
Okay, I see.
But choosing low GI foods, it helps give your pancreas a break.
And that might help prevent problems down the road.
Exactly. It could lower your risk of developing insulin resistance, which is a key factor in type 2 diabetes.
So it's about making choices that support your metabolic health in the long term.
You got it.
Okay, we've talked about weight management and diabetes. But what about other areas, like heart health? Our sources mention benefits for blood pressure and cholesterol.
You're right. There is a connection there. Some studies show that low GI diets can actually improve both cholesterol levels and blood pressure.
Wow, really?
It's pretty amazing. And those are both really important for heart health.
It's like it all ties together. So it's not just about one specific benefit, but rather a whole bunch of positive effects.
Exactly.
But before we get too carried away, I think it's important to be realistic too.
What do you mean?
Well, the research on low GI diets isn't perfect, right?
You're right. There are limitations. Some studies have involved other lifestyle changes alongside the low GI diet. So it's hard to say for sure what's causing the benefits.
Right. So it could be the low GI diet, or it could be other things like exercise or stress management.
Exactly. It's complex. And of course, we always need more research. There's still a lot to learn.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the glycemic index. We hope you found it helpful.